Just code faster. That's what my managers have always told me. So in this video, I'm going to share my top secret productivity tips so that you too can keep your job, if you have one. Tip number 1, multiple monitors. So I know a lot of people like coding on their MacBooks because it's convenient and you can take it wherever you want, but I primarily work in front end, and having to go back and forth between the code editor and your dev environment is just so tedious. It might just be a me problem, but I feel like it's so inefficient compared to having multiple monitors. So the solution here is to just be rich. For me, 2 monitors is the bare minimum, but what about 3 or 4 or 15? Well, I usually use 3 monitors because I can't afford the mental strain of 15. So this is my first monitor where I pray to find an answer to all of my problems. We have my sensei, Chatgpt here. And also we have the best YouTube channel I've ever seen in my life. Not sponsored, by the way. And onto my second monitor. This is the big monitor, which contains my code editor. And as you can see, it also follows the 3 monitor setup. So I have 3 different tabs open, able to be so productive like this. And onto my third monitor. Ooh, this is my local dev environment, and it looks like it's in an error state right now. Feels like my whole life has been in error state, but it's okay. We'll fix it sometime later. Maybe. Tip number 2, remove distractions. According to this research study, an average of 2.1 hours are lost daily as a result of distractions. The average time spent on a task before we get distracted is 11 minutes. The amount of time it takes to return to a task after a disruption is 25 minutes. So to put it all together very simply, distracted equal lose time. So if you're struggling to get into the flow state and actually get work done, it might be because you're watching K-pop dances on the side, or because you're checking your phone every few seconds to see if anyone cares about you, or your desk is a complete, utter mess. So here's what I would do. Close all apps and tabs that are not code. Even the K-pop ones, especially the K-pop ones. Get your phone and throw it far away. Clean your desk. You know all of the stuff that you keep on your desk that can possibly distract you? Well, just shove it all down. Out of sight, out of mind. Now you'll become so bored that you'll be able to focus on the task in front of you and get into the flow state. At this point, I usually like to listen to music as well. If I'm working on coding something super intensive, like implementing a button, I usually like to listen to music without words, like piano music or instrumentals. But lately, I've been listening to New Javi's Reflection Eternal on repeat, but I'm not going to play it right now because of fear of demonetization. I need that $2 ad revenue before tax. Tip number 3, max DPI mouse and keyboard shortcuts. The mouse I use is the Logitech Pro Superlight. I have it set to 25,600 DPI. This is the limit, not my limit, but like the software's limit. And with this amount of DPI, I'm able to save seconds every time I move my mouse. Compounded over time, I'm basically saving lifetimes worth of time just by doing this. This is why I'm so productive. But actually, this is still slower compared to using keyboard shortcuts. So you should use keyboard shortcuts whenever you can. Imagine if you had to move your mouse to click everything in your code editor. That would get tedious so fast, just like coding on one monitor. So I use keyboard shortcuts for my code editor, which is VS Code, and for my browser, which is Google Chrome. It depends on what code editor you use, but I would just search on YouTube what are the most common keyboard shortcuts for your code editor. Take a note of the most useful ones and practice. A good way to practice is to only use your keyboard when you're using your code editor. This forces you to do active recall on which shortcuts to use. If you don't remember it, just look at your notes. Over time, as you keep doing it, you'll be able to remember it. This is kind of like typing on your keyboard for the first time. In the beginning, you always have to look at your keys to remember which ones to press, but as you practice over time, it becomes muscle memory. Tip number 4. Planning ahead and setting deadlines. Parkinson's law states that your work will expand to fill the time allotted for its completion. For example, when I was in college, I had this assembly language class that had an assignment every 2 weeks. Whenever I was assigned an assignment, there was no way I was going to start that right away. I did not want to go anywhere near that. So basically, I would start a few days before it was due. And I know a lot of you do this as well. This same concept can apply to the projects that you're working on. If you don't set an early deadline for yourself, you may end up wasting a bunch of time because you feel like you have a lot more time. So before I even start coding, I usually like to look through the existing code base where I'll be implementing this and plan out my tasks. To give a very simple example, if I need to implement a custom button that calls an API on click, I usually create these steps kind of like a recipe, cooking up a button. Then I start coding by following these steps, and this makes it so much easier than if I was just to start coding right away and trying to figure out what to do at every step. You can break your big tasks into smaller tasks like this, and it'll feel much more easier to manage. Although planning takes some extra time, you end up saving a lot of time because you know what to do at every step. Tip number 5, Chatgpt. In the last section, we had that recipe. Imagine it was your first time creating a button like this. Now you can use Chatgpt to help guide you through what the code should look like by going through the recipe. So I would type this in Chatgpt. In React, I want to create a button component that takes in a property which will control the styling. This button will not do anything on click and will be hooked up to an API later. What are some of the best approaches? And it spits out a bunch of different approaches and you can see which one you would like to use. So it's not like you should just copy and paste all of the code over. You should always make sure that you understand what the code does and it works how you expect it to. You can do this with the rest of the steps, but if your feature is more complicated, then this might not work because Chatgpt doesn't have context of your code base. But I think what makes Chatgpt special compared to using Google or Stack Overflow is that it remembers your responses and it builds upon it. You can always ask it to explain something you don't understand that is specific to your chat. So this is one of the main ways I use Chatgpt for coding, but I do plan on making a video about all of the ways I use it in the future. Those are all of my tips on how I stay productive while coding. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.